Hello, everybody. It's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined by the great Mychael Danna. And on today's episode, we will talk about some of his career highlights, as Mychael will be given the Lifetime Achievement Award at this year's Soundtrack Cologne Congress. It is my pleasure to welcome back Mr. Mychael Danna.
Hey, it's so great to see you again, Michael.
It's great to talk to you again. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule. I really appreciate that, Mychael. And I know we cannot cover everything today. Your career has been so enormous up until this point. And Mychael, you are originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. There are so many people hoping to break out in this industry, and they try to get at least one foot in the door. And how did you land your first job in Hollywood, and how did you experience your first years in this business?
Well, it's and I tell young composers this all the time that what my kind of arc is not really applicable, I don't think, to today, but and also I think just everybody has different paths from their beginning to where they end. So I certainly couldn't say it's applicable because so much of my direction that got me here is luck and just being in the right place at the right time. But I guess that is there is something in that. But yeah, I was born in Winnipeg, which is kind of in the middle of Canada and pretty remote, especially back then from although there's a great music tradition there and so on, but certainly nothing to do with film. And but I grew up in the outskirts of Toronto, in the suburb of Toronto, and timing wise, I came up. I was interested in classical music and I was interested in pop music, and I kind of was in both those worlds and played in bands and studied piano, and I was in choirs, and I was a choir leader and organist, and then I ended up playing going to college at the University of Toronto for music composition. And while I was there at the college, there were a lot of theater groups, and I got involved with them doing music for them, and mostly because they were a lot of fun people, and just it was a great kind of social it was fun to be part of a team, and being a musician and a composer, it can be a very kind of isolating thing. And so I was just drawn to the idea of helping to tell a story and being part of a storytelling team and all working together in various kind of departments and crafts to bring together to have this performance. I found it really fun and really satisfying. I had no interest in being part of film music because it just seemed like something completely separate from my life. Hollywood was very far away. Toronto was not really a filmmaking center when I was really young. So it just seemed like another planet that, these films would come onto your movie screen or your television and came from this far distant place and with people that we had no connection to. So I had no interest in it. Actually, I wasn't a big film fan. I didn't actually like film music that I heard as a kid, except for there were a few exceptions, but mostly it just I wasn't drawn to it. I was very drawn to, pop music and classical music, and I loved music. It was everything to me, but yeah, movie music, not at all. So I did end up, at college studying composition and then working with theater groups. And then one of the people that I met in theater was Atom Egoyan. He was a playwright at that time, also going to the University of Toronto. And basically, he was in the same theater circle that I was. And I heard through friends, oh, this Atom guy is making a movie. You should talk to him. And so I did. And that literally is why I'm sitting here talking to you today, because of that. So that's not a very applicable story, I guess, for a young composer now, but that really is how it happened. And what was so great about that collaboration, that meeting, is that we just clicked right away. We were both interested in the same, certainly at that time, very offbeat things. Now, non-Western music is obviously, and it's been a big part of my career and what I've sort of brought into film music. Now it's extremely common. Every average film has lots of world music instruments in it, and music from different periods. But that was the thing that we were both interested in, Middle Eastern music and medieval music. When I went to his office, I saw both those things on his shelf. I was like, oh wow, you have David Monroe, London Consort. I love those guys, and he had this Egyptian music, and so we immediately clicked. And because we were in theater, there were no rules about what you could and couldn't put in theater music because it was completely free and wide open, and there was no money in it, so there was no pressure about what you had to do in order to pay bills. So we just did whatever we felt like, and so we just continued that into film. His films were kind of at the early forefront of the Canadian auteurs, the independent films of that time. David Cronenberg is another example of someone who came from that same time and place. And his composer, Howard Shore, that's how Howard got his start, and me as well. And these early art films were really kind of promoted and supported by the Canadian government and the local provincial governments and so on. So it was really right place, right time for his filmmaking, and for his filmmaking was the right setting for what I was interested in, what my skill set was. And we still continue to work today, and we're literally working on a film right now together. So that's the long circular story that I have to tell you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mychael. There is a small quote which I would like to read. The most gratifying filmmaking experience are the ones that take effort to unpeel the layers surrounding the heart of the story and find the best musical expression of the heart. Those are always the film scores that I'm most proud of. Which scores are those? How would you sum up, or how would you describe which film scores you are most proud of in terms of either director, composer collaboration, or in terms of story, or whatever aspect the films offered you?
Well, I think and by the way, this is something that I worked through with Atom Egoyan, was this idea of um, he's a conceptual filmmaker, and the music is a part of that conceptual storytelling. So the music always has its own, sometimes parallel, sometimes perpendicular, um, kind of thematic thread, story thread. So you have films, I mean, my films with Adam that I'm so proud of, Exotica or The Sweet Hereafter. Both of those are films. The Sweet Hereafter is an example of a film that has this story within a story. You've got the modern day story of this small village in Canada where been this tragedy, but within that story is the fable of the Pied Piper, and how this story, how does that ancient fable and the reading of it, and you have Sarah Polley, who's in that film is like 19 years old, and she's she plays a babysitter, and she's reading this fable, but this fable is really kind of a parallel story to the story that the film is telling. So what is fun about the score is that the score is actually scoring the fable, not the present day story, but it's scoring the Pied Piper. And so we have, again, talking about medieval music, we literally used the Toronto Consort to play this early music, and a Persian ney to be the Pied Piper. And then as well, because Sarah Polley's character plays in a band, and I'm literally on stage in the movie for a few seconds if you don't blink, playing in this band. So those are the kinds of films that are really fun, where you have um, music doing something other than just reinforcing what we already see on the screen, telling people we can see they're in love. Now the music is going to say they're in love, they're in love, they're in love, or there's tension, tension, tension. So look, that superficial storytelling has to be done, but when there's underlying currents and underlying themes and concepts, that's when it's really rewarding and fun. And I think the music becomes a really valuable part of the filmmaking. So that's one film, for instance, that I'm really proud of, just for that reason.
What do you think is the most interesting and or challenging part of the film industry or working with a visual medium?
Well, I think the thing that you have to always remember is that the music is at the service of the story. Um, that the music has to it's it's not music. It's not I'm not a composer. I'm one of the filmmakers, and I'm helping to tell the story in through my craft, which is music. And I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind, is just the kind of command structure, the layer, the level of what's important in film. And the most important thing is the story, and then the director's filtering of that story. The story comes through the director and the director's vision, especially in these auteur-driven films. And that's the thing that the music needs to understand and to portray. I think what can be difficult is that there are many demands, just as we kind of touched on. There's many demands for music at any given moment in a film. So there is the superficial demand of we need to make the atmosphere clear here, that there's jeopardy, that we have tension. That has to be taken care of on that superficial level. And the other thing that has to be taken care of is that, especially on bigger films, and you get into the Hollywood system, there's a lot of different agendas, and there's a lot of people, a lot of different people that personify those agendas, producers, studio heads, music department people. Then you have your whole team of musicians. So you have conductors and orchestrators, and everybody has their own kind of agenda and what they want from the music and what they hope it to give the film. And as a composer, you have to somehow satisfy everybody and make everyone's demands and kind of hopes for the music come through. And that can be really complicated in the Hollywood system, where you have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 producers, all of which are in a meeting, and you play something and one of them says, make it faster. The next guy, make it slower, make it happier, make it sadder. And you have to somehow make all of them, and the next time you play the music, make them all feel that they were heard and that you've addressed their their hopes and demand. So that's where it becomes a complicated profession, in that you have to not only deliver music, but you also have to deliver the process of the filmmaking world. And it can be a very politically complicated, and it's ever changing, and every film is different. That's a skill set that is incredibly essential for a composer.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to briefly talk about Joel Schumacher. I think you only worked with him once on 8 millimeter, which I think
Mm.
is one of Joel's best films. And now the film was misunderstood and also somewhat massacred by critics. But I tend to believe it's one of his strongest and best films. I know it's not an easy Subject matter, it's a tough movie, but I don't think Schumacher ever crossed the line as to what can be shown to an audience. And I think it's so intense and atmospheric, and your music is really bold and also non-traditional Hollywood scoring. And what do you remember of Joel Schumacher and the approach you two worked out for this incredibly intense 90s film?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think Joel, I think that film would have been appreciated much more if it had not been made in the studio system. If it had been an independent film, it would have, I think it really should have, in a way, been an independent film. It was an audacious script, especially for the time, very edgy and controversial material, but perfectly legitimate for a film to get into those sorts of things. And this film was delivering something that was much more frightening and really kind of a bit unhinged in a way that an independent film can, legitimately do. So I think that's a big part of it. Joel was fantastic to work with. He literally just said, I started to ask him about what it was he wanted the music to do, and he basically said, my movie is bold. I want you to be bold. Be bold. He literally said that. And I said, well, and so here's the one reason it was good to have it as a studio film. I said, okay, well, here's my idea. This is Nicolas Cage's character is like being drawn into this whirlpool that has no end, and that's both enticing and frightening. It's repulsive and attractive at the same time, and yet it has this kind of pull to it. So I said, there's you know, the music that makes me think of is Moroccan music. And so I said, well, I want to go to Morocco and record the score there. And he said, great, go go do it. So I think there's something, and by the way, I did that on many independent films. Exotica, I went to South Asia and I did basically the same thing with 1/100th the amount of money, and I still was able to do it. But this certainly, I think, for a studio film was, yeah, it was an audaciously bold film, and yeah, an audaciously bold score. And I got hate mail from people about the score, that they just thought it was like, people like, why do you have this woman wailing? What is this weird instrument? Like, what kind of music is this? And so, which was kind of fun because that was the point of the movie, was to get under your skin and upset you. We succeeded. So yeah, I really enjoyed my experience of working with Joel, and yeah, he was a real amazing character in the Hollywood scene. And yeah, I'm sorry. I just was talking about him with my friend Harry Gregson-Williams recently, who also worked with Joel. And yeah, we were sharing stories about him, and yeah, just what a character he was, but also what a filmmaker who had this incredible sense of finding up and coming talent, I guess, including me, and finding actors and so on, that he would just say, this guy and this woman and this person, and then suddenly, yeah, you look 10 years later and they're major players. So he just really had a nose for up and coming people.
It always surprises me as to how people might react to a movie and sending hate mail to a person who worked on the film. It's so ridiculous, and I know people complained about the foreign nature, quote unquote, of the
Yeah.
music because they felt it's an American character, it's an American movie. But I think that was the whole point. It's an exotic world, it's a terrible world. It feels strange, it feels foreign to
Yes.
Nicolas Cage. So
Yes.
the music needed to reflect that. And then sometimes people say, well, this kind of a score has been done 2,000 times. can't people come up with something original, and then something original and bold happens, and then they're like, well, this represents everything that is wrong with the state of film music these days. It's so preposterous at times, you know. You probably get my point. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying it because yeah, look, I found it I mean gratifying that it bothered people because that just means that we succeeded in what we were doing. And you exactly described, yeah, the whole point was, yes, this is America, but it's a layer that is shut, kind of closed off to most people, and they want it to be closed off within America and this kind of exotic world that exists, underground. Something that, especially in America, Americans are very uncomfortable with, and want to deny its existence. And so I think that's what's really powerful about the film and the score for it, is that it is really in your face and it's really something frightening. The music sounds very different. And of course, it's not exotic music if you're Moroccan, but it is if you're American, especially at that time. For the majority of Americans, that was a bizarre and strange and exotic sounding score.
I would like to get your quick thoughts on working with first time directors. You had worked with Wally Pfister on Transcendence, who is known for being Christopher Nolan's cinematographer on Batman, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and other movies. And you worked with Denzel Washington on his first movie called Antwone Fisher. So,
Mhm.
how do you work with a first time director who is not really experienced in this? In the field of directing, and they have to make so many decisions today about wardrobe, about costume, about editing a film, about the musical choices. How did you experience that, Mychael?
Well, it's interesting that you choose two people that, although they may have been first-time directors, they're very experienced in the filmmaking process. And so I think with both Wally and with Denzel, they're both extremely comfortable on set and with the process of producing a film. And so I don't think for either of them, neither of them felt like first time directors. They both had a really good grip on what makes a good film and what and how a director should be. They both worked with great directors, and so they had the tools to know. And I think also, by the way, actors and cinematographers and composers as well, because we work with different directors, we see the things that work and the things that don't. And so I think there's something, I'm sure when Denzel was on the other side of the camera, he would remember what he liked about directors and what was less helpful. And so those kinds of things can actually make those experiences feel pretty comfortable. Um, I have worked with other first time directors on features, and but yeah, I can't really think of. I think it's a matter of, but I think honestly that this happens for every director, is that the film is something very important to them. Obviously, it's something that they've been working on usually for several years. And now they're handing over kind of a major part of the core of the heart of the film to a composer. So yeah, they have a lot of stake in what it is that you're going to be doing. And I think as a composer, you have to be comfortable with that idea and also make them feel comfortable with that idea, that yeah, we're going to work. I'm not taking this film away from you. We're going to be we're going to work on this together. You're going to be a composer of this score as well. So if you were my director, Mychael, I would say we're making this score together. This is our score. It's not my score. It's our score. Now let's get into it and talk about what it is the score needs to do. And then yeah, so if you include them in all um the decisions and the forming of the concept, and then the forming of the execution, yeah, people will feel comfortable. Yeah, and I did, look, I've seen the panic of first time directors, and I had one director who the night before our session literally called me and said, I just think we're on completely the wrong path. Like we everything we've done is wrong. And I was like, okay, just relax, take a deep breath. Let's remember we went through this carefully. Like we built this step by step, brick by brick. I'm very confident of what we're about to record. And then yeah, of course, he heard the first notes from the score, and he literally called his wife and went, "This is the happiest moment of my life." And so it you can see those kind of swings with somebody who's less experienced and hasn't gone through it, but that's your job as a composer, is to make people feel, yeah, that you have the ability and the confidence to not necessarily to do it, but to work through whatever it is that needs to be done, and do it together and collaboratively. So it's not, you're not just sliding the film under my door and then 2 months later out pops something you have no connection to.
And I would like to mention Ang Lee because you had worked with him on a number of occasions, and also you won the Golden Globe and the Oscar for The Life of Pi, which I think is one of your best scores, and also it happens to be one of your most popular scores. Mychael, as I understand, it wasn't a walk in the park to write the music for this film. And what made it so difficult, and how did you ultimately solve the problem?
Well, I think what made it so difficult is that there's no film like it that exists before it. So there, you can't look at another film and say, well, this is how it was solved. This is how you do a film like this. If it's this kind of a genre or this kind of a storyline, this is a bizarre novel. It's a masterpiece of a novel, but it's a very strange book. The structure of it, the fact that I mean, there's so many things about it that are so unusual. The fact that there's hardly any dialogue, the fact that we're not even sure if what we're seeing is real or not. We don't know, do these animals exist? Are they a figment of his imagination? Are they symbols? There's so much unknown. And then culturally, it's of course based on an Indian boy from an Indian family. And yeah, so it had a lot of it just had unknown territory written all over it. And so, and Ang being an extremely conceptual filmmaker, and he's a deep thinker, and there's nothing random in his films. Everything is deeply thought out. And I have pages of notes that I took while he was shooting. He would call me in the middle of the night and start talking about, the symbolism of the night versus day, or the father and mother and the earth and sky, and all these things that I had to kind of track in the music. And I think what happened at first was that I tried to stuff all that meaning into the music, and it for several months. And by the way, the movie also wasn't working at the same time. It was still all being cut, and they were trying to figure out how to make it work and feel good. And one of the discoveries is that for the music was that at one point Aang went, please just write nice music. Like, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that music should be nice to listen to. Like, I was trying to make it put so much meaning into it, and try to bring all these different cultures in, and all these different themes. And so what I did is I literally just went, okay, I'm going to take this book of notes and just put it over there and never look at it again and forget about it. But frankly, it's already in me. I've been thinking about it and studying it, and so it's already there. So, but now I just have to forget it, and then write nice music, but that still will be inside it. And having compassion on the audience, as Aang would say, like it's hard enough to watch Pi go through what he's going through. So we have to have compassion on him and the audience. So that really was the challenge. And then, it took months, but it did, the film started to take shape and the score kind of took shape alongside with it. So it was a very rewarding experience in the sense that it was like climbing a mountain that just seemed impossible, and it really seemed like we were going to fail, I think, for a long time. And then to see it come together and feel, oh, this is something special and it's really working. That was an amazing feeling.
You have worked with so many notable and great directors: Ang Lee, Atom Egoyan, Gregory Hoblitz, Scott Hicks. What do you think was the best filmmaking or scoring experience you ever had? The ultimate collaboration, so to speak, for whatever reason. Be it a special moment at the scoring session or a special moment when you discuss the project, anything that comes to mind that kind of displays the magic of movie making.
Well, there's so many, and I guess that's what makes it hard to choose. So many, and they're mostly collaborative moments. Um, and and I do have to say, yeah, I remember the difficult ones, I guess, more, almost more than the ones that were more straightforward. Um, and I think of Moneyball, which again was one that was really hard to, because at its essence, it was something very simple. You had to build, because the idea is this idea of an idea of Billy Bean has this idea of how to make a baseball team really successful with no money by looking at it in a very different way. And then this kind of excitement of this little spark of an idea, and then it just starts leading and leading and leading. And you get that feeling of kind of excitement, like, oh yeah, it's working, but it can't get anywhere or else it's finished. So this music had to have this sense of like this good feeling of, oh, this feels good. Like, yeah, we're getting somewhere, but you can't actually get there or else it will finish. So that's the kind of thing where a concept drives what the music is when it's written. And coming up with a concept can be really difficult, like getting to that point of realizing that's what the cell of music needs to be. That took a while. Um, but then to actually write that where it works, and that also is very difficult. And when the idea comes and suddenly you feel that, it's an amazing feeling. So that's one. The collaboration with Devotchka in Little Miss Sunshine is
Mm.
another thing where just working with a band, really talented people, and um, yeah, so that was really rewarding and fun. And yeah, there's so many, so it's hard to say what the ideal one was. But yeah, the difficult ones where you really struggle but then break through are the ones that I remember the best in a way, I think.
Yeah, and I know it's not always a pleasant experience scoring a movie or working on the film, no matter if it's a director or a producer or any composer. And as I understand, and you don't have to comment on it if you don't want to, but you worked on Hulk, also directed by Ang Lee, but some of the music which you wrote still ended up in the film, but you had to leave the project because the approach you took wasn't relished by the studio. Is that a fact?
Yeah, it is. And Aang, no one felt worse about. Yeah, that was a situation where the politics of the film got really complicated. Um, I've always allied myself with the director. To me, I really want to just have one conversation, and that's with the director, and really understand the story and the theme and the concept through their through their eyes and just kind of filter it through them. And I think that was earlier in my career, and I was maybe less skilled at dealing with other voices in the process. And so yeah, and I think we were doing something again pretty audacious. I had all these drummers from around the world, and I think the studio was very kind of shocked at the film being not what they expected, and then also the music being not what they expected. They had to find some comfort somewhere, and so that was the move that they needed to do. So yeah, it was very, I mean, look, everyone gets fired if you work long enough. If you haven't been fired yet, well, you haven't been working long enough. Keep going because you will. So it's part of the process, and it's a learning. Yeah, it's very painful, especially for Ang and I, and we're very close. It was really hard for him too. Honestly, I think it was. I mean, it was very hard for him as well. So, and yeah, we worked again after that. So, and many of my best movies are with him. Ride with the Devil, The Ice Storm, both films I'm incredibly proud of, as well as Life of Pi. And so yeah, there's been yeah, it was certainly a complicated situation, but it's one that I have no bad feeling about in any way, in a sense. I don't blame anybody or feel bad about it, really. It's just, yeah, I definitely learned how to deal with studios better after that, and was more conscious of what I had to do in that area as well.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just how the business goes, and I think most people go through that at some point in their careers. But
Yeah.
you've been so fortunate as you have been given the opportunity to work with great filmmakers. You worked on very good movies, and just recently I was watching Chloe, which was directed by Atom Egoyan, or The Devil's Knot, also a very interesting movie.
Yeah.
Capote.
Mm.
There is so much going on in your career. You have done tremendous work also with your brother Jeff,
Mm.
also on a film called Fracture, which I love. I think
Yeah.
it's a really really good film. And you
Yeah.
also got to work with Harry Gregson-Williams, also one of
Yeah.
today's finest composers. And as I understand, you two go way back. Is that a fact?
Yeah, we're friends. We really enjoy each other's company, and so yeah, we knew we had to work together at some point. We work with our brothers. Both of us work with our brothers, and we always joked that we should, dump our brothers and work with each other. So that opportunity came up, and we were really excited and happy to work on it together.
Yeah. Return to Space, that's what the film
Mhm.
was called.
Yeah.
Very interesting project. Mychael, I know you probably have to run. What else would you like to add in terms of your career, in terms of music, in terms of the upcoming Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony?
Yeah, it's been amazing to be here in Cologne, and it's really fun. I mean, these congresses, these meeting places of people in music and sound, and for media, are incredibly important. And just to be able to share ideas and the latest issues, and yeah, it's the strength of our community is these kinds of meetings where we're also isolated most of the time. So it's wonderful. And Soundtrack Cologne has just been a really important and influential Congress for 20 years. So it's really fantastic to be recognized here, at a place that I've always this Soundtrack Cologne I've always admired, and yeah, known lots of people involved with it for many years. So it means a lot, and yeah, just so happy to kind of see the latest people and the latest ideas, and just knowing, yeah, everything's still develops and goes on. And yeah, it's been really fun to be part of it for my career.
Mychael, thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule today. I really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
Thank you, Mychael. I did very much. Always great to see you, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Yes, hope so. Thank you, Mychael. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.